Hey everybody, it's All for His Glory Alone, also known as the Dog Preacher.
So I go
Yeah.
I go to two different Sunday mornings. I go to a Bible Baptist church, which is more of it's a big church, about 400 people. But on Sunday nights and Wednesday nights, I go to a Reformed Baptist church, which has like its congregation is maybe 25.
Yeah. You know what I used to do?
Yeah,
I
completely different, completely different. The Bible Baptist is a synergistic church, and that's where my kids and my wife and I really that's where we went to after we left the Pentecostal church.
Right.
So they're kind of ingrained in there, and it's just not an easy thing to move.
what I used to do is I used to get up real early and I would drive to John MacArthur's church, which is past Burbank, so it takes about a little over an hour. Uh, I'd go to his church and his service starts at 8:30 in the morning. I'd get there about 7 and I'd go to the visitor center and sit down and talk to people and stuff. But um, he has like the best worship. I mean, because they worship like what I like. I like they have what they'll do is they have where we sing out of the hymnal, and he has an orchestra, and the orchestra will sometimes play a number, and then we sing songs, and then they'll have then they have a full chorus, and then they also have it like a guest singer. So you have a little bit of everything, but you don't have this rock and roll like U2 up on stage, which I like U2, but when I go to church, I'm not there to watch a rock concert.
That sounds
Yeah.
like the Bible Baptist church I go to, and it's always we always sing like 4 or 5 songs as a congregation. Then they have the choir sing a song, and then they have somebody come do a one or sometimes it's a couple people do a solo type thing. So
Yeah, and when you try to share this with people who have a different view, they tend to look at you like you're legalistic or something. And I want to make it clear too, because we got about 4 or 5 viewers right now. At least that's what it shows. A lot of times I shut this off and I look at the views and it's like 78 people watched, even though the screen only shows like 4 or 5 people. So I want to make sure they understand this. When I talk about worship and the singing and stuff and what I like, we're not saying there's anything immoral or wrong about doing it one way or the other. I'll just say this. I'm 43 years old. I've been going to church since I was real little, and I'll tell you there's something about the congregation lifting up their voices together, and having that be the centerpiece of the worship uh, music. Singing out the hymnal or singing something up on the screen, but they're lifting their voices together. When you go to a church that has like a electric guitar and a bass and drums and all that stuff, and the guy who's singing's voice is mic'd really loud, and it's a small room, like my church is. Pretty much you're sitting there listening to the band sing, and you are singing, but you don't really hear your own voice, and you don't hear the voices of anybody else sitting in front of you. You just hear the guy's voice. And even though you're worshiping God, and that's all that matters, there's just something lost.
yep. Let me tell you how the Reformed Baptist church I go to when we praise. It's always we sing 5 hymns from the hymnal. They're and they do have a piano. That's it. One person's playing the piano, and everyone else is just singing the songs from the hymnal.
The young generations, the kids and stuff, they complain and all that stuff. But at Dr. Bob's church, when it was in Irvine, California, that's gone now. But he used to do this thing that I thought was awesome. And all of us that were like my age or older or around my age, we all kind of agreed. The more theological thinking people agreed. He would explain the hymn. He would talk about the history of it and what it meant and all that. So for about, I don't know, a couple minutes before we sang it, and then by the time he was done, when you sang it with more emotion, and it meant more to you because you knew where it came from, why it was written, who wrote it, the story behind it, whatever. And it was so amazing. But then I found out later, like a few months later, when he was having health problems and stuff, and we had more guest pastors and stuff, and his daughter took over like the worship and stuff. that they wanted to kind of get rid of that because they were getting complaints from like the college kids and stuff like that. I'm like,
I see. That's
really?
like a good idea to me. I like that.
Yeah. I mean, when I heard the story behind, um, I'm trying to think of that song now. It is well with my soul. When I heard the story behind that, I lost pretty much his whole family, except for his wife, whatever, at sea, and all this other stuff happened to him and everything. And he wrote that during that time. That's why when you sing the line that says, "When sea billows roll," he's talking about when the shipwreck happened and he lost his daughters. They drowned and stuff. And he's saying when all these bad things happen, you know, you can say it as well with my soul because you know the Lord. Um, it was 10 times more meaningful. But nowadays we live in the what Dr. Bob used to call the 7-Eleven generation, which is we sing 11 lines 7 times.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same that every song has like is very basic and we just sing the same thing over and over again. Like I like that song Our God is an Awesome God or whatever.
Yeah.
But I like the traditional one. Our God is an awesome God, he reigns, right?
They do. The modern people try to take old hymns sometimes and make them, more or modern. But like I said, I come from for the first 25 years, I was Pentecostal, Assembly of God type person. So back 25 years ago, they sang more traditional hymns than I. By the time I left, it was a rock concert. I mean,
Yeah.
I had to leave. One part of the reason I left is I was having a headache by the time they were done with the worship service. Because
I sit out in the foyer most of the
like
time.
a rock concert, and it was just blaring in your ears, and it's like, this is not honoring to God. I'm sorry, I can't consider this worship anymore.
It's annoying. But again, it does boil down to just a matter of taste. But see, when we talk about this, in my opinion, it's more edifying to hear the voices of people singing to God than it is to hear. And I'm a fan of like 70s Judas Priest and Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones and all that stuff. So I like rock and roll music. But when I go to church, there's just something I want a difference. I want people to just lift their voices to the Lord, and to me that's more. But you got to be careful because my upset about it at first ended up becoming unbalanced too. Because at the end of the day, it's not about how it sounds. It's not about the style of music. It's about the place of your heart when you're worshiping. So that's what you got to be careful about, because a lot of times when you go to a church that does do a different style of worship, they have every right to do that, and they're loving God their way, and there's no prescription. And here's
No
the,
doubt. Yeah, I guess
well,
I got old, and I couldn't handle it anymore.
here's the key right here. When Scripture doesn't prescribe to you how to do something, there's liberty. But you can't say it's wrong to have a guitar. You can't say it's wrong to do this or that, because unless Scripture gives you a prescription on how to do something, there's liberty in how you handle it. That's where I disagree with the people who believe in what's called the
regular principle of worship.
Yeah,
Those guys take it where you can only sing the Psalter and no instruments. I disagree with those views too, because you do have Scripture saying, worship God with songs, hymns, and other things. I mean, you're not limited to just the Psalms.
Well, here's since I kind of brought that up and you're talking about. Oh, by the way, I muted you, Hunter, just because there's some background noise. So when you want to speak, unmute yourself. But when you're not speaking, remute yourself, because there's a lot of noise in the background. But as far as it's okay. As far as the regulatory principle goes, it's a very easy to refute that, because the way they enforce the regulatory principle is not mentioned in Scripture. And the rule of the regulatory principle is you can only do that which is mentioned in Scripture, and if it's not mentioned, then you can't do it. So it's kind of a self-refuting philosophy, because the way they enforce it isn't mentioned in Scripture. They take it from one verse where it talks about go, and I'm gonna have to try to think where it is because it's been a while since I talked about this. But they take it from a section of scripture where God sends people in to do something, to invade a land or whatever, and He tells them, "Now, when you do this, do all that I've instructed you to do, and do no and don't do anything else. Only what I instructed you to do."
Yeah.
And they take that verse and they use that to apply to the regulatory principle. The problem is the context isn't the church worship or congregation or the assembly. It isn't an imperative about worship. It's simply saying, if I go in and tell you to do this in this battle, don't do something different. So that's all it's saying. Then they go the exclusive psalmist, which is what you were mentioning. They go to the verse that says, singing in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. Well, that's easy to refute too. And you could just say to them, okay, singing in psalms. Now, what are psalms? They are a type of song, right? Well, psalms existed before David wrote the Psalms. And you notice how it doesn't say the writings of David or the Psalms of David? It just says Psalms. So, for them to say you can only sing the Psalms is to ignore the verse. The verse just says singing psalms, and then it says songs and spiritual songs. Now, why would it have three different types of descriptions of things you could sing if it meant only the writings of David? So it's basically just people wanting to control and be legalistic. That's all it is.